Now that we've worked on setting your strategy, I wanted to take a deeper look at a great exercise called SWOT. Steve Wright has a great background in market research, is going to explain SWOT to us in more detail. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thanks for joining me. I'm always happy to talk about SWOT. It's one of the few tools that I've used over the years that I find it always gives me a good return, whether I use it professionally or personally. It's something you can use in either way. Now, I've been noticing with your workshop, there's a lot of material there. There's a lot of options for these people, and I'm sure that some people will probably want to just go ahead and try a few new things, or they may want to mimic what their competitors are doing. But if they really want to look at what's the full potential for their business within this new media marketplace, a SWOT exercise is a good place to start. And it could be just as simple as taking out a blank piece of paper and dividing it into 4 quadrants. And on the left, we have the internal environment, the strengths and weaknesses of the business itself. And this is something that a lot of businesses don't really understand. They understand their weaknesses, but they don't always understand their strengths. They are focusing on they're short on labor, or maybe some people aren't trained, or they have some problems in the service department. But the strengths that they have, they tend to ignore, and especially in today's social media age, they may have some strengths that they haven't recognized are relevant to those tools. So there's a lot of new information they can get when they start to look at the strengths and weaknesses of their business. Furthermore, there's some new tools now to try and identify those. The same is on the opportunities and threats side, which is the other 2 quadrants. The right-hand column is the external environment. These are all things that are generated from outside the business. So a threat might be competition, or higher tax structure, or a recession, or something like that. Whereas opportunities could be new markets that are emerging. The opportunities don't even have to be opportunities traditionally are expected for that business. They could be a growth in the Hispanic market. Like in California, the Hispanic market is about 40% of the population and 47% of the workforce. 20% of the people in California speak Spanish primarily. So if a business isn't addressing that, that's an opportunity they're just ignoring. So when it comes to populating this matrix, the purpose is to try and find the freshest, most current information for each of these quadrants. And social media gives us an interactive internet, and mobile applications give us new opportunities to populate this matrix, particularly on the strengths and weaknesses. And this is something I learned from you, is all the tools that are out there now for businesses to be more aware of what people are saying about them. You gave some wonderful examples.
Well, I know for a fact that if you want to get feedback from your customers, there's a few ways that we can do that at very low cost, if no cost at all, where we used to have to pay market research firms a tremendous amount of money to get that same information. I know SurveyMonkey as an example. You could even go all the way to Facebook poll questions. I know that Constant Contact and other email marketing services have polls, so you can get feedback to learn more about your strengths and weaknesses that you may or may not be aware of.
That kind of aha moment is what you're looking for in the strength department. And it doesn't come into play right away. Once you realize it, you get in that quadrant. Later on, we're going to look at the opportunities and the threats, and we're going to figure out how to use these unique strengths to find a differentiating strategy that's going to distinguish them in the marketplace.
Wonderful. Let's try it out. Let's take a look at each section of this quadrant a little bit more closely. Why don't we use my consulting business as an example? So if we look at my consulting business and strengths, what would we do?
Well, once again, those feedback techniques are pretty good. You have to kind of honestly write down in that quadrant what you think your strengths are, and the feedback you've gotten before, what you have known intuitively or viscerally, what's working for you, what's paying off. Look at the numbers. What have they been saying to you? That sort of thing. A lot of this is just metrics. But also the feedback from your blog postings and everything else. Look for those key words that identify something about what it is that you do that really differentiates you from the competition, because that's what a strength is. As far as weaknesses, I think we all can be pretty brutal on ourselves, but the weaknesses that you identify may not be the same thing that your customer set identifies. So I think you populate that feedback there.
So I'm going to look at the metrics for, say, my website, my blog, maybe my Facebook page, also maybe do a survey of my clients and customers to pull out my strengths? And would I be populating my weaknesses at the same time, or would I be doing it separately, do you think?
Actually, you can populate all 4 quadrants
Okay.
at the same time, but it's good to focus on each one to make sure you're really thinking about it. But eventually you get done and you'll wake up the next day and you go back and you'll add something.
Okay.
Because that's the way it is. And even though at one point in time you have enough to go ahead and go to the next step, which is putting together strategies, it's a living document. And from time to time you may say, well, that weakness is gone, and you cross that off.
Got it.
And especially in a time that's changing as rapidly as things are now with the interactive internet and social media, is there are going to be new strengths. You say, wow, I didn't know that strength was even relevant before, and now it is because of the way things are happening.
Absolutely.
Then there's the other side of the column, the opportunities and threats. I think the toughest part about opportunities is people take kind of a myopic view of opportunities that are the classic opportunities that they've expected or they've gone after all these years. And you really have to divorce yourself from your business when you look at the opportunities and begin to say things like, well, if I were starting a business from scratch right now, what is the environment that I'd be in? And if I was trying to come up with a new company, what's happening? And that's why I brought up the things previously about the growth of the Hispanic population and the Spanish market for here in California, because that's a very powerful market to go after. There are also many other changes in the marketplace you can find out. Like for a few years ago, real estate was pretty hot. Now foreclosures are pretty hot. So a lot of things are economically driven. And when you have an economy going through change like this, not only does it diminish in certain sectors, but it restructures so that the business opportunities that were there before are just plain gone for a while, but there's new opportunities that didn't exist before. So how do you find out about these things? Lots of times within your community, there'll be some sort of regional economic forecast that you can go to. There's plenty of reference papers you can find on site. But in social media, you were explaining about TweetDeck and how you can create a search column, and maybe there's a way to put up a column about your product or the kinds of things you're interested in and just see what people are saying?
Absolutely. You can use TweetDeck or any other listening monitoring tool. I personally use Hootsuite, but they're almost exactly the same. You can look for your industry terms. Say it's tourism. You can use a hashtag or a simple search term to look for that. You can look for your competition's name. You can look for the name of your product, the name of your business. So you can constantly be monitoring those types of things. You can also use Google Alerts to listen to the general internet, blogs, videos, other comments, etc. All of those same categories apply. You can also use, one of my favorite tools actually is if you're using LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a tool called LinkedIn Today. It's actually the equivalent of a digital newspaper. And what it does is based on the keywords that you put into your profile, it will provide you with topical information from today's news, from a variety of sources, from the Harvard Business Review to NPR to Bloomberg, on, Wall Street Journal, that will pull information that is industry specific to your interests. So you don't have to review a tremendous amount of resources. They bring it right to you. Those are some of my favorite ways to look at opportunities. One thing I also think about with small businesses is that small businesses now have the opportunity with their websites to have a hub that was more powerful than ever before. If we're now including PayPal or other shopping cart features, relatively low cost, they now have e-commerce functions on their websites. Publishing alone with intellectual property, you can publish with Scribd, SCRIBD, if you haven't heard of it. It's a great way to publish PDFs and documents and possibly sell them as well. Then you can self-publish. So intellectual property provides that residual income that's ongoing with the e-commerce capacity within their low-cost website. You can be a publishing house just in your own site. Those are some brand new opportunities we didn't have before.
So in some cases, the opportunities are the technologies themselves, not just where the technologies can take you.
They literally allow a small business owner, medium, even a large business to advance and to have more opportunities to make money and capitalize on their intellectual property. And the technology alone every day is giving us more and more opportunities to do so. The self-publishing market is a big booming growth category, but just allowing you to have e-commerce on your site, the automated software as a service invoicing services allow you to produce billings in a much faster fashion, automates the process. So yes, the technologies are addressing the needs of the small and medium business owner more than ever before, and they're enabling us to make more money and do it faster.
Well, I think one of the key points is you can't spend enough time trying to figure out what the opportunities are and continuing to look at that. And having a good assessment of your strengths is important. The ultimate strategic power of the SWOT analysis is not only knowing who you are, your strengths and weaknesses, and what's out there, but learning how to link your unique strengths to those opportunities. And that may require a feat of imagination. They're not automatic, but the more you look at it, the more you begin to realize, okay, that's me and I have this capability, and there's the opportunity. How can I use that to get there? And in some cases, social media might be the answer. Up to now, we've been talking about social media as a tool to help populate the grid, but social media can also be an answer to developing a strategy. But before we go there, I want to talk about that last quadrant.
Please, I'm looking forward to hearing more about
Threats. Tell me now, if you had a competing business to you,
I do.
what you would look for to find out everything about them.
First of all, I would start with the website. I would really look at their website, the services that they're providing, the way that they're pitching their service, the way they're communicating their benefit, their pricing. I'm also looking at their region, who they serve. Those are some basic features. And then beyond that, I would look at the variety of ways that they're communicating, from their blog, their Facebook page, their Twitter feed, anything else that they have available. I would absolutely dunk myself in information based on what my competition is doing, so that I have a really great grasp of what they're doing and what they're missing.
Well, competitive research has always been a pretty high-ticket item for large companies to pay for that and get that material. They pay for $1,000 research papers they get quarterly and things like that. But nowadays, it seems like you can just do it on your own. There'd be Google alerts about your competition. You could follow blogs that they talk in, and you could set up, I guess, a tweet search.
I subscribe to my competitors' newsletters. I subscribe to all of their feeds. So every piece of information that's going out to the public from them, I get. Occasionally, I do use Google Alerts, depending on a specific search I want to know. I personally tend not to get regular Google Alerts on my competition because it feels like it's a dart hitting me. So I make choices about when I'm going to follow them. And thankfully, my competition doesn't communicate so much that it doesn't feel like that same dart. But I do turn on those Google Alerts when there's something specific that I want to know, or there's a new service that I'm thinking of deploying, or I've identified a new strength of my own, and I want to see how they're using that same strength, if they have that even at all.
But it does seem that automatically or semi-automatically, a company could be aware of everything their competition is doing on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And that would be profoundly good. And now, when we talk about the SWOT model and how you now take this model and turn it into effective strategies, there's a traditional methodology for that, which is actually based on war theories of war. I think von Clausewitz on war was one of the main ones. But the idea is that you take your strengths and attack your opportunities. And that's the 80-20 rule. If you spend 80% of your time on those activities, well, you'll get the return.
I have a question, because I know that we tend to emphasize the negative, and you did say this already. So if I am spending too much time focusing on my weaknesses, how can I turn that around and look at my strengths and make sure that I'm addressing that section of the grid?
It is a matter of priority. There's three statements in how to apply the SWOT. The first one is take your strengths to attack your opportunities. That's number one, and we can get back to that. Number two is weaknesses. Bolster your weaknesses. That doesn't say conquer your weaknesses. It doesn't say make them your biggest priority. It says bolster them. So if you have a resource problem or a training problem, you start to work on that. You improve that a little bit. And the third one is on your threats. Is avoid threats. Threats can burn you out. And you had some great commentary on this the other day about everybody can beat you at price. And what was your recommendation for a strategy?
Everybody can beat you at price. If you look on the internet, there's somebody out there that you simply cannot compete with, and you don't understand how they can be so inexpensive. But what they can't do is be you. Nobody can do you. So as long as you're confident that what you do is what you do well, then nobody else can compete with you on that category, and you can't be compared apples to apples.
And I think in market speak, we'd call that a differentiating strategy.
Correct.
So you sidestep them, you parry whatever it is that they're doing, you figure out how you can be uniquely different, so you're not really head-to-head competing. You're allowing them to kind of slip past one way while you go after your market target another.
And this is also very useful to know when you are speaking to your prospective customer or your current customer that's thinking of taking their business elsewhere. I'm clearly aware of my competition. My competition is different than me. They're wonderful. I'm a big fan. I'm not speaking negatively about the competition. I think it reflects negatively on your character. So in that instance, I would say they're a wonderful service provider. We are different. How we differ is this. My competition emphasizes the internet market. Or my competition looks at the global market. I look at the local market. So we are very, very different, and we tend not to trade each other's customers.
Well, and going back to your strengths, you're also very personable. People like you. You connect very well with people. You do a lot of hands-on training. You can cross over to the physical world in terms of organization and skills, as well as the virtual world. So there are a lot of ways I know that you can differentiate in that regard. So when it comes to putting together your market strategy, that would be part of it. So I think originally you asked me, what are the steps I should go through? And we basically brainstormed that how do you populate the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And then there's the 3 steps to formulating a strategy. And the first one was use your strengths to go after the opportunities, or as they say in the war strategy terminology, to attack your opportunities, and pour it on. And that's where you put a tremendous amount of effort in that, because that's where you're unique and you're different, and you want people to know it. And nowadays you have so many ways of letting people know how you're different. So I would think that once you know what your strengths are, and you know where the opportunities are, and you have all these social media tools, blogs, various types of email marketing, and that sort of thing, your branding would have a lot to do with, these are my strengths, and I want these people to know about them.
Yes.
And you'd find the channels. Earlier, you talked about looking at Pew Internet to find out where these people are. And so you figure out the right channels of social media or different technologies to get your branded message to them.
Absolutely.
And that should be a pretty big effort. And when the sales start coming in, then you know you're right.
Absolutely. So I'm using to look at my strengths, my metrics. I'm also looking at one thing I think is important is to look at the operating systems that people are coming to you from, the devices that they're using, how long they're spending on your website. Of course, this is all part of your metrics report, but what's going to be helpful for you if you combine that with Pew Internet Research as an example, what tool they're using and what demographic you're trying to reach or what new demographic is out there, you can combine those 2 pieces together, your strengths and opportunities, and find new opportunities. It's 1 + 1 = 3 is really how I see the strength and opportunities going together.
I think there's a lot of ways to continue to get feedback into this model and to build it and make it stronger over time. But I think initially someone just needs to set it up. And once again, this can be personal. I've done this on myself for my own career. What are my strengths? What are the opportunities that are out there? Usually works out well when you're unemployed. But then you map out a strategy, and that may be the basis of a resume. Or a new job search or something like that. If you're a small business, it may take your business in a different direction. I like to think of the example of a restaurant. And obviously their marketplace is limited by how people can drive there. But maybe they're known for some sort of roasted garlic salsa. Well, how many unique brands have you seen in Costco or on Amazon and these other places that started out as restaurant brands?
Absolutely.
So when they're beginning to think, how do I grow and how do I expand, then maybe one of the things they'll want to look at is packaging that product, and then how do they market on the internet? How do they do those sorts of things to expand? So as a result of getting that information and plugging it in and thinking about the different types of strategies that are appropriate for each quadrant and writing them down. And this is the key thing, because the next thing we're going to talk about is implementation.
Yes.
And so if there's 4 strategies or 5 strategies that come out of this, I would expect 3 of them to be strengths attacking opportunities and maybe 1 on weaknesses. It's a proportion thing. The whole idea is that when you're done, you've got an aggressive strategy for growth. And once you've written that down, then you're ready to take the next step.
Absolutely.